Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. This is the second half of a two-part series on the regions of Arkansas. If you haven't seen part 1, I'll link it here. It isn't necessary that you watch these videos in any particular order, so don't feel like you need to immediately leave to watch that video, but they are a set, so if you watch one, you should definitely watch the other. In the last video, I discussed the 3 highland regions of Arkansas, and in this video I will be discussing the 3 lowland regions of Arkansas, along with a bonus region that I'm giving you guys because I like you. Looking at a topographical or satellite map of Arkansas, you can see these distinct highland and lowland regions. The 3 lowland regions that you'll typically learn about in Arkansas history class are the West Gulf Coastal Plain, the Mississippi Alluvial Plain, and Crowleys Ridge. But like I said, stay tuned to the end because I'm giving y'all a bonus region. Let's get started. The West Gulf Coastal Plain is south of the Ouachitas and is part of a wider region that stretches south to the Gulf of Mexico. In Arkansas, the boundary of the region is marked by the fall line at the southern limits of the Ouachitas and by a series of waterways on the eastern side. From Little Rock to Pine Bluff, this is the Arkansas River, and from Pine Bluff to the Louisiana state line, this is Bayou Bartholomew. Understandably, you might be thinking that a plain is a plain and wondering what makes the West Gulf Coastal Plain different from the Mississippi Alluvial Plain. And really, there are several things, one of which is that the Gulf Coastal Plain is made up of ancient seafloor, while the soils of the Mississippi Alluvial Plain are relatively recent alluvial deposits. We'll get into what that means later. The land of the West Gulf Coastal Plain is level to rolling with extensive areas of loblolly and shortleaf pine forests. It is home to deposits of sand and gravel, as well as significant deposits of clay, bauxite, and petroleum. These natural resources really form the backbone of the region's economy, which is dominated by forestry and forestry-related industry, with limited agriculture. This region accounts for more than 50% of the state's wood production, and timber companies own around 2.6 million acres of land just within this region. Minerals are also an important resource in this region of the state. Bauxite, an aluminum ore, has been extensively mined in Pulaski and Saline counties. In fact, around the time of World War II, this was one of the leading aluminum-producing regions in the nation. Clay deposits in Hot Spring, Hempstead, and Miller counties gave rise to a significant brick industry. And, in the 1920s, crude oil was discovered in the southern part of the region. The first wells were dug near Stevens, and today 10 counties in Arkansas produce oil. Union, Lafayette, Columbia, and Ouachita combine to produce more than 85% of the roughly 20 million barrels of crude oil originating in Arkansas each year. However, perhaps the most famous mineral resource in this region is one that isn't produced in bulk. The Crater of Diamonds is located within this region and is a unique feature in the United States, yielding many diamonds since they were first discovered in 1906. Among these are Uncle Sam, the largest diamond ever discovered in the United States, and the Strawn-Wagner diamond, the first diamond ever graded a perfect 000 by the American Gem Society. This region is covered in dense pine and cypress forests and has the highest temperatures of any region of the state. Soils are deep and made up of a mixture of sand, silt, and clay that support mixed forest cover. Shortleaf and loblolly pines are the most extensive, with bottomland hardwood forests common along and near streams. Oaks, hickories, and gums flourish in better drained areas, with willows and oaks in flat, poorly drained soils. The Gulf Coastal Plain is one of the most sparsely populated regions in the state, with many county seats having populations below 2,000. Among the few larger cities are Magnolia, Smackover, El Dorado, Camden, Crossett, Star City, Hope, Texarkana, and Monticello. The Mississippi Alluvial Plain is commonly known as the Delta or the Arkansas Delta. It has been shaped by the flow of large streams and covers most of eastern Arkansas, including all or parts of 27 of the 75 counties in the state. It is the flattest region of the state, with elevations ranging from 100 to 300 feet above sea level. It stretches for 250 miles from north to south and ranges in width from 12 miles in Deshay County to 91 miles between Little Rock and the Mississippi River. I said that I would talk more about alluvial soils in this section, so here we go. Large rivers, including the Mississippi, Arkansas, White and St. Francis shaped this region by eroding older deposits and building up deep layers of soil, gravel, and clay, sometimes up to 100 feet deep. This flat terrain and deep topsoil is exceptionally well suited for large-scale farming, making this one of the most agriculturally productive regions in the world. This region produces immense amounts of cotton, rice, and soybeans, among other crops. It also has a rich aquaculture industry, raising catfish amongst other fish varieties. However, these soils are also sometimes extremely dense and poorly drained, allowing for the formation of wetlands. Many wetlands have been drained and converted for agricultural use, but they still cover around 8% of the state's land surface. Some of the most significant conservation topics in this region focus on encouraging restoration and protection of these wetlands. Some of the most significant wetlands, also known as bottoms, are along the Cache and White Rivers, where the largest continuous expanse of bottomland hardwood forests in the lower Mississippi Valley remains, representing nearly 1/3 of all remaining bottomland hardwoods in Arkansas. The wetlands are an internationally important winter habitat for migratory waterfowl. The White River National Wildlife Refuge alone is a temporary home to 3,000 to 10,000 Canada geese and up to 300,000 ducks each year, accounting for 1/3 of the total found in Arkansas and 10% of those utilizing the Mississippi Flyway. Wetlands also store excess water, prevent floods, improve water quality in streams, protect against shoreline erosion, recharge groundwater, provide recreational opportunities, and provide aesthetic beauty. Let it be known that this channel is firmly pro-wetland. The wetlands also contribute to the region's distinct natural vegetation. Wetlands proper tend to feature bald cypress, tupelo, and gum trees, with willow and overcup oaks in poorly drained flat locations. Higher and better drained areas tend to feature oaks and hickories. Another important feature of this region is the New Madrid seismic zone, which is a prolific source of intraplate earthquakes and is found in the northern part of this region. This region produced the historic New Madrid earthquakes of 1911 and 1912, and several more relatively small earthquakes in the time since. There is estimated to be a 10% chance of a magnitude 7.0 quake in the area sometime in the next 50 years. In terms of human occupation, this region has a history dating back thousands of years. Among the prehistoric sites in the region are the Sloan site, which is considered to be one of the oldest cemeteries in the Western Hemisphere, and the Toltec Mound site, which is a relatively large prehistoric ceremonial site. Later, the area was occupied by historic tribes, including the Quapaw, Chickasaw, and Tunica. The first European settlements in Arkansas were in this region, which quickly grew in prominence and population. However, since Arkansas developed later than other southern states, it has fewer of the typical grand old plantation homes that one might expect to find in other agricultural areas of the region. Prior to the Civil War, black slaves formed the majority of the population in this region. Its reliance on slave labor and plantation economy led to the region becoming culturally and politically different from other regions of the state. It also helped the region become more politically powerful than other regions. In fact, the political influence of this region was the primary reason that Arkansas seceded from the Union, as none of the other regions benefited from slavery quite as much as the Mississippi Alluvial Plain. After the Civil War, agriculture remained the main industry, switching from being reliant on slave labor to sharecropping and tenant farming. The combined stress of the Great Mississippi River Flood of 1927 and the Great Depression turned the politics of this region upside down. There was a rise in social support programs, support for progressive policies, and racially integrated groups like the Southern Tenant Farmers Union fighting to improve conditions for poor farm laborers. Today, this region remains the most consistently Democratic voting in the state. While some of that is a holdover from the days of racial segregation pushing Southern Democrats, a non-insignificant amount of support was won over by New Deal policies and later Democratic figures like Lyndon Johnson and Joe T. Robinson. This region is inexorably culturally tied to Mississippi and Memphis, and the region has a rich musical heritage, especially with blues, ragtime, gospel, and rockabilly. Artists including Louis Jordan, Al Bell, Sister Rosetta Tharpe, Al Green, Johnny Cash, and Levon Helm have their roots within the region. More than 50% of the region's population is black, and it has more black majority towns than any other region of the state. However, it also has some of the lowest population density in the South. and the population is consistently shrinking. While agriculture continues to thrive in this area, modern technology means that these farms employ far fewer people than they once did. Unfortunately for the region and those left behind, the loss of population does lead to a shrinking tax base, which hampers efforts to support education, infrastructure development, community health, and other improvement projects. This leads to extreme poverty, unemployment, and illiteracy being more common in this region than others. There are few cities in the Mississippi Alluvial Plain proper, with most populated areas being concentrated in our next region. The cities that are in the Delta include West Memphis, Newport, Brinkley, Lake Village, Blytheville, Augusta, and Osceola. Crowleys Ridge is a small yet distinctive region of the state. It ranges in width from 1 to 12 miles and extends for about 150 miles from southeastern Missouri to the Mississippi River near Helena, West Helena. It is made up of a continuous series of rolling hills rising around 250 feet above the surrounding Mississippi Alluvial Plain, with a slight break near Marianna caused by the Langee River. There are several theories as to how the ridge formed, but these two are currently favored. One thought is that it was once an island between the Mississippi and Ohio rivers, long before they were in their modern locations. While the large rivers eroded away most of the land, they left behind a narrow island that became the ridge. Another theory posits that recent seismic evidence shows that the ridge is an uplift related to the bordering New Madrid Fault. There's also some evidence that the area's elevation is still increasing, suggesting that the uplift is ongoing. The ridge is capped by a deep layer of wind-deposited loessial soils that were easily eroded away to create the ridge, but continue to erode, creating steep slopes and deep valleys. The land is rugged, discouraging row crop agriculture, but supports extensive areas of pasture. Pasture is well suited to the region as the loessial soils need some protective vegetation layer to prevent further erosion. Native vegetation is predominantly oak and hickory forests. Many of the trees that make up the forests on the ridge are more similar to those of the western Appalachian Mountains than to elsewhere in Arkansas. This includes species like American beech, sugar maple, and tulip trees. In terms of economy and culture, this region is inexorably tied to the surrounding Mississippi Alluvial Plain. Many of the farmers who farmed the flatlands of the Delta built their homes and did their business in communities along the ridge. Because of this, some of the largest cities in eastern Arkansas are located within this tiny region, including Jonesboro, Paragould, Wynne, Forest City, and Helena, West Helena. Now, I believe I promised you all a bonus region? The Grand Prairie is officially a subregion of the Mississippi Alluvial Plain. However, I think that in many ways it is distinct enough to merit being discussed as its own region. The Grand Prairie is a large, flat area of native grassland located between the bottomlands of the White and Arkansas rivers in Arkansas, Lonoke, Prairie, and Monroe County. However, the region has grown less geographically distinct due to the clear cutting of the alluvial plain. Indigenous peoples occupied the Grand Prairie for thousands of years. Early European immigrants were later drawn to the area, including Germans who established Stuttgart in 1878, and Slovaks who founded Slovak in the 1890s. These settlers quickly began working the land. However, they were not immediately successful. Dense, poorly draining clay was not well suited for cotton farming, and there were essentially no native trees, which meant that there was no timber industry. In fact, until the late 19th century, there was not much industry at all. In 1897, rice cultivation began in earnest on the Grand Prairie. And while this spelled doom for most of the native prairies, the economy of the region, and Arkansas as a whole, would never be the same. Today, Arkansas produces more rice than any other state in the United States, especially focusing on long-grain cultivars. About 50% of all rice produced within the United States comes from Arkansas, with Arkansas, Lonoke, and Prairie counties each producing over 3 million bushels per year. Cities of the Grand Prairie, including Lonoke, Des Arc, Stuttgart, and DeWitt, remain focused on agriculture, and Stuttgart maintains strong ties to the German ancestry of early settlers of the region. And with that, our journey through the regions of Arkansas has drawn to a close. Unless, of course, you started with this video, in which case you're only halfway through. Go check out the first half and learn about the highland regions of the state. Thank you for joining me, and I hope to see you back in the future. Until then, feel free to check out some of the other videos on my channel. Thanks for watching. This is Mapstronaut.